A whisper came through Emma's window just as the clock struck midnight. It was soft, almost like the wind, yet somehow urgent, calling her name with a familiarity that made her blood run cold. Her friends laughed when she told them about it, insisting it was just her imagination. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was outside, watching, waiting. Against every instinct, curiosity crept in. She turned her head for a fraction of a second, and saw a shadowy figure retreating into the fog at the edge of her yard. By morning, Mrs. Delaney, the neighbor she often waved to, had vanished, leaving only a cup of tea still steaming on her porch. Phones in town began receiving strange calls, distorted voices repeating a chilling phrase, "Do not turn around." People whispered about it online, tales of disappearances spanning decades, townspeople who never returned after hearing the call. Emma felt herself drawn into the mystery, knowing she couldn't ignore it. Something had begun, something ancient, and the moment she acknowledged it, she had already become part of its hunting ground. The fog thickened as Emma and her friends drove away from the town, hoping the roads would lead them to safety. But the streets twisted unnaturally, looping back in ways that made no sense, GPS faltering with static signals. Shadows danced in the corners of the windshield, fleeting glimpses of figures that weren't there a moment ago. Panic grew as the whisper followed them, echoing through the car, calling each name in a voice that seemed impossibly close. One friend, overwhelmed, glanced behind them and disappeared, leaving only the seatbelt swaying as if someone had been sitting there. Emma gripped the wheel, her pulse hammering, realizing the entity wasn't just a phantom. It could mimic voices, manipulate what they saw, and prey on their fear. Every turn brought new dread, a sense of being hunted in a forest that had no end. There was no escape, only survival, and the horrifying realization that the call could reach them anywhere, even inside the car. Each mile passed felt like hours, every shadow a potential threat, and the entity's presence became suffocating, relentless, and terrifying. The abandoned motel rose from the fog, its windows dark, its sign swinging eerily in the wind. Emma and her remaining friends entered cautiously, doors creaking, footsteps echoing on empty hallways. Rooms were untouched, as if frozen in time, yet the walls were covered in frantic messages scratched by previous guests. Never look, never answer. Phones that once rang with the call now played distorted screams. Emma realized that this place was a trap, designed to lure the fearful into the entity's domain. Paranoia set in. Shadows moved in corners, voices whispered in familiar tones, testing their resolve. Attempts to leave failed as the fog outside seemed impenetrable, a living wall. Sleep offered no relief. Nightmares bled into reality, showing missing friends in distorted forms, urging them to turn, to look, to answer. Emma discovered a journal tucked under a bed, its pages filled with accounts of those who failed, each entry a warning about curiosity and fear. The group huddled together, knowing that to survive they had to resist. But resistance was harder than it seemed. Every whisper, every shadow was a test, a challenge to their will. The entity's presence was suffocating, a predator with patience beyond human comprehension, waiting for the slightest falter. The forest surrounding the motel was dense, the fog thick enough to dull sight and sound. Emma's group tried to navigate, hoping to escape its grasp, but every tree, every path seemed to shift, to trap them in a maze. The whispers became voices of their loved ones, calling from the darkness. Fear clawed at them, hunger gnawed at their resolve, and one by one, panic led them astray. One member, unable to resist, turned, and the entity claimed them instantly, their scream swallowed by the mist. Emma felt the oppressive weight of inevitability, but pressed on, remembering the warnings in the journal. Each step was calculated, every rustle a potential threat. They stumbled upon remnants of past victims, torn clothes, journals, items left behind in panic. Emma's mind raced, trying to decipher the pattern, the rules of survival. The forest itself seemed alive, bending reality, erasing paths, mocking escape. Shadows moved just beyond vision, whispers persisted, each sound a lure. The tension built, nerves frayed, and Emma realized that only absolute control over fear could keep them alive. Each heartbeat was loud, every whisper a temptation, yet turning around meant certain death. Emma and her remaining friends attempted the ritual described in the old journal, a desperate chance to banish the entity. They lit candles in a circle, chanted lines of warning, but the air itself seemed to fight them, heavy and suffocating. The entity's whispers mimicked voices of loved ones, voices of friends who had vanished, pleading, mocking, tempting. Every fiber of Emma's being screamed to turn, to answer, to give in. One friend faltered, nearly breaking the circle, but Emma held them back with a strength she didn't know she possessed. Shadows writhed around them, moving as if alive, whispering their darkest fears. The ritual faltered halfway, a terrifying failure that left them exposed. The entity loomed closer, just beyond sight, and Emma found herself alone in the center of the circle, hearing the call louder than ever. Her heart raced as the shadows pressed in, whispers echoing, reality bending, and she understood that the only way to survive was to confront the fear itself without ever turning. Emma fled toward the city, roads unfamiliar, time disjointed. The fog never lifted, streets were empty, lights flickering. She glimpsed figures resembling her missing friends, only to have them vanish the moment she approached. Panic threatened to consume her. A stranger appeared, claiming survival by never turning, warning Emma that the entity could always reach her. The whispers intensified, voices familiar and alien blending, luring her to glance behind. Her car seemed to stretch endlessly, the reflection in the rear view mirror whispering her name, promising both solace and death. Emma realized that escape wasn't just physical. It was mental, a battle of will against the entity's cunning. Each step forward was agony, every second a test. Even in the city, surrounded by people, she felt its presence, a predator patient and eternal. Emma's resolve hardened, knowing the rules: never turn, never answer, never falter. Survival was the only option, but the entity's reach was infinite, and the final challenge was still ahead. At the cliff's edge, Emma confronted the entity, fog swirling, the wind carrying distorted voices. The figure remained unseen, a presence, a force of terror that fed on fear and curiosity alike. Voices of loved ones, friends, strangers, all called, promising relief, safety, reunion. Emma's mind battled, resisting the instinct to turn, to answer. The ritual from the journal had failed, leaving her with one truth: the entity could not be destroyed, only defied. Hours passed as shadows writhed, the whispers testing her every nerve. Then silence fell. The fog lifted slightly, the entity gone. But the peace was fragile, temporary. Emma breathed, exhausted, but a faint whisper carried across miles, reaching a city far away, hinting that the call never truly ends and the hunt continues. Survival was a victory, but the terror, the entity, and its whisper remained, eternal and patient, waiting for the next ear to listen.